Hello and welcome to another episode of the djproject Criterion Collection. And here we're going to talk about Spine 575, The Killing, directed by Stanley Kubrick, 1956. Alright, I've said a lot about Kubrick. I don't want to try to repeat everything, but just a very, very quick recap, I consider Stanley Kubrick to be a cinematic father figure for me personally, because I admired his complete dedication to his filmmaking, that his relentless pursuit to make the best film he can on his own terms that he can be proud of, and it's that personal investment and commitment to your art to one's art is very inspiring. So I consider Kubrick to be very inspiring in that respect, and I like a lot of what he does. You can get a lot out of his films. I've also talked a lot about the difference between late Kubrick and early Kubrick, and this is another film of early Kubrick. This was the third feature film that he had made, and little by little there was a steady growth in terms of what Kubrick could do. The very first film that he made was Fear and Desire, which I mean, certainly compared to the rest of his work is like, there's some, I mean, even he not disowned it, but he didn't think much of it. But you could definitely tell that this was a guy that knows how to use a camera, knows how to make an image, and can pull together a sequence of images. And I think probably the big thing that he learned in doing it was the importance of editing, and how it's not just the images, it's how you put the images together. And he improved greatly in his next feature, which is also included in this edition, by the way, as a second disc, and that's Killer's Kiss. And this is the only time where he has made something original, meaning it's not an adaptation of something else. And he didn't have another writer come in. He really did everything himself. And again, I think it was to hone his craft as far as making films, and also just because of resources. But he was able to pull it together. I mean, it's not perfect, but there is definitely a charm to it, and by contrasting this with Fear and Desire, that you can tell that he has grown in a lot of ways in leaps and bounds. And that film would get the attention of James B. Harris, and they started a partnership. And this is the other thing about Kubrick, is that from the get-go he was independent. He was going to do things his way. He was going to chart his own course. And this is the other thing I find very fascinating. While he has that independent streak, he also got the sense that he knew how to draw or what could draw an audience. So he's not going to just so he's not like Von Trier. He's just going to be a provocateur and just piss people off. But he's going to, if at all possible, to use what's out there. But if there's an interesting way of doing something, if there's an unusual way of doing something, then it should be done. Which leads us to The Killing. The Killing is noted for its unusual structure, utilizing a lot of flashbacks and cross-cutting between different events, both present and past, to sort of reveal little by, because this is a planned robbery of a racetrack, and so part of it is there's this notion of control and making sure that everything works according to plan, and you don't want to have any reason to have it fall apart, or to have people double cross you, or to to derail the whole thing. So things are revealed little by little, and in addition, a little bit about the players involved, their lives and their situations and so on. And it's this, it's this great little film noir that plays to film noir conventions, but also at the same time does things a bit differently. In fact, this film, I think Tarantino owes a lot to this film. If it weren't for this film, you wouldn't have Reservoir Dogs. Yes, I know there's another film that formed the basis of Reservoir Dogs as well, but that idea is the sort of the fractured narrative of not doing a linear A to B narrative, but just fracturing a little bit. But yeah, the killing is definitely interesting in the Kubrick filmography. It's him honing his skills and really honing it to where he was really confident in what he wanted, often to the annoyance of other people, most especially the assigned cinematographer for the production, Lucien Ballard. Remember, Kubrick started off as a stills photographer, so he was interested in, he worked with photography himself since he was 12, and so he had that photographic sense, and that's what makes it, because he's gone through the process numerous times. He knows instinctively what he wants as far as lighting, how to compose the shot, and what can be done. And but what's interesting is that he also he doesn't just simply he composes around the scene rather than having a set image. I mean, I think he does have certain images in mind and certain things he wants to go for, but he also wants to see what's actually there and just photograph that moment. Or as he would later tell Jack Nicholson, you don't photograph the reality, you try to photograph the photograph of the reality. So it depends on, it depends on the scene, it depends on the actors and where you are, and you let them kind of dictate where the camera is going to be. And he had the sense to find that, like he knew where to place it, because he had that highly developed sense of developed photographic sense. So, but yeah, it's watching this film, you could tell. I mean, it's easy to see this film now and think that, oh, Kubrick's going to go on to do some great things, but at the time, it was a film when people did see it, they went, this guy's gonna, I think this guy's gonna go places, and he's gonna do something really great. And then the next film was Paths of Glory, so, and then we all know the rest of the story. So, and I think another thing that what makes this film particularly interesting is something that you don't usually think about when you think of Kubrick's films, and that is dialogue. I think for Stanley, it was images and music that could carry the film, and in other words, that dialogue is more of a secondary art. But he also understands that it can't just be just any dialogue, and that if you're going to have dialogue, it should be effective dialogue. It should reveal I mean, obviously, it should move the story forward, especially if you have a plot-driven film, and The Killing is definitely plot-driven. So not only does the dialogue have to do the job, but it can also reveal something of character, can give you a sense of time and place and status. You know, there's a difference between someone who's highly educated speaking about something compared to someone who may not know as much. You know, street talk. So and this really comes through, and this is due in large part to Jim Thompson, who was hired to work with Stanley on the script. He got sort of chided in the end. He initially, I think the credit was with additional dialogue by Jim Thompson, and I think it was in large part because I think it was Stanley. I mean, I don't excuse it in a certain respect. You know, Stanley was trying to make a name of himself, but he also Stanley tried to help him out in other respects. You know, throughout his as much as he could, even when Kubrick would go on to other things. You know, beyond just beyond capers and heists and other film noir things. But I mean, it really comes through, and it's really great to hear. And I like any aspect of film that's good. You know, I like good cinematography. I like good performances, but I also like really good dialogue. And this is a case where if you want to hear some really good dialogue, there you go. Which, as I've said before, I feel that dialogue is a lost art. Not a lot of, with some exceptions, not a lot of attention is placed on dialogue, and often dialogue comes off as sounding too utilitarian, and it attempts to be too clever or too pandering, but it doesn't feel. I mean, it depends on what you're trying to say. I mean, genuine could be one thing that it should be, but I think it should also be true to whatever it is that you're doing. Obviously, it should service the story. It should service the convention of that story, but it can also reveal something of character. So, but yeah, it's obviously I'm going to recommend it on the basis of that it's Stanley Kubrick. But even if you're not necessarily interested in Kubrick, it is. I mean. It is a Kubrick that isn't as obvious. But again, like I said, the thing that I like about one of the things I like about Kubrick is that he has that nice blend of someone who wants to do his own thing, and if there's a new way of doing things, you should do it, but at the same time, working with an audience, not being so completely divorced that you end up alienating your audience, but trying to appeal to a crowd as possible, and have as big of an audience as possible. So, and The Killing does that, and for, you know, again, in the 1950s, film noirs were a popular genre, and he played to that, but he did it in a very unusual way that kind of took some people by surprise when it finally was all made. But I think because of that, it makes it all the more interesting and all the more memorable. So yeah, and that's The Killing. And until next time, take care.